Skete of Prophet Elijah is situated in a deserted area on the northeastern slope of Mount Athos, 140 meters above sea level, surrounded on three sides by a mountain range immersed in green forests and bushes. The eastern side has a wonderful view of the sea, where the Greek monastery of Pantokratoros, to which the Skete is administratively subordinate, stands on a rocky cliff on the very shore. Thanks to its location, the Skete is open to the winds from the east. There is always fresh and healthy air, and the fertile soil and warm southern climate make it possible to grow a variety of fruit trees and grapes. Skete of Prophet Elijah is remote from main roads, so there is constant silence and stillness, very conducive for the monks of the monastery to lead a secluded life of work and prayer. Bishop Prikliuchenii visited these places in 1846, and this is how he described it in his book, The Christian East, Athos. From the shore of the Aegean Sea, where the monastery of Pantokratoros stands on a sinuous cliff, a tortuous valley rises to the ridge of Athos, irrigated by the Chrysourari river. On the right side of this river, high up on the slope of a mountain spur, which can be seen from the monastery of Pantokratoros, rises the Skete of Prophet Elijah, in the shadow of large cypress trees. This Skete is now a real monastery. The legend of its former state and foundation is told, starting with its founder, the renowned elder Paisias Velichkovsky. Today the Skete has a rectangular shape, and in the center of the courtyard stands a grand temple with 7 domes. It is in the Byzantine style and is dedicated to Saint Elijah the Prophet. The south wing of the Skete is dominated by the chapel of Saint Mitrofan of Voronezh, now renamed Saint Joachim, while in the southwest corner of the Skete, on the upper floor, there is the chapel of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, built by Saint Paisias Velichkovsky. Another temple. The Russians dedicated it to the Blessed Virgin Mary. We have also dedicated it to the Blessed Virgin Mary, but we have only designated it as the Feast of the Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. You can see that the murals in the church follow the theme of the Akathistos of Our Lady, the compositions of the first, second, third, etc. of the Kontakion and Dikos. This old icon of Our Lady of Tikhvin has been preserved from the former church. We left it as it was. It has its old cover on it. After the restoration, we only added another row around the edges. The northern two-story building is of the corridor type and is arranged along the entire length of the Skete. The upper floor houses monastic cells, while the lower floor houses the chapel of St. Nicholas. It is a basilica that was in active use until the main temple of the Skete has been completed. We are now in another temple, which is now our main weekday temple. All the daily weekday services of the week are held here. This church is now dedicated to Saint Nicholas. In former times, it was also dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, in honor of the icon of the crying Mother of God. After the restoration, we dedicated it to Saint Nicholas. As you can see, the frescoes are very fresh. We started painting the temple quite recently. eastern side of the Skete is enclosed by a basement building, the flat roof of which forms a platform with an open view of the sea. To the west of the main temple, under a massive arch, there is the gateway to the monastery, above which there is a three-tiered stone bell tower separating the western building into two parts. This two-story building houses the monks' cells, a refectory, a library, a reception hall, an iconography workshop, and an exposition where items made by the monks are sold. All pilgrims arriving at Elijah's Skete are greeted by a mosaic icon of the patron saint of the Skete, the Prophet Elijah, set up above the entrance gate. Father Philemon, the abbot of the Skete, is like a hospitable host who welcomes us in the inner courtyard of the monastery. Each of our meetings with him is always filled with warmth and heartfelt joy. In the Skete, next to the entrance to the main church, there is a well with extremely delicious and fresh water. It was dug in the 19th century under the abbot's archimandrite Bala. This is how the pilgrims are received at the Skete, with kindness. The first mention of the cell at the site of Skete of Prophet Elijah dates back to the 15th century. It is known that in 1492 the cell had an annual maintenance, appointed by Vlad III Tipes himself, the ruler of Wallachia. This is how the Russian traveler, writer and publicist Vasily Grigorovich Barsky described these places in his book. Below this road, on a bright and level spot, the church of the Holy Prophet Elijah is built, with a courtyard where 4 cypress trees grow, one of which is particularly beautiful, but there are no cells yet and no one lives there, as its construction has not yet been completed. The history of Skete of Prophet Elijah is linked to the arrival of the Venerable Paisias Velichkovsky on Mount Athos.
Εδώ στο Άγιον Όρος έφτασε το 1400, το
He came here on the Holy Mountain on the 4th of July 1746 and began to live near us in a cell called Kipari. This is just above our monastery. After a while, he moved a little higher up to another cell called Saint Constantine and Helena. There he had his first little brotherhood. When the fraternity reached 12, they were already crowded and they moved to the Skete of the Prophet Elijah, where they made their first buildings. The brotherhood was increasing, needed a priest, and asked the Venerable Paisias to become a priest. He refused, explaining that the reason for coming to Athos was precisely the persuasion to become a priest in his homeland, which the Reverend so wanted to avoid. Nevertheless, Father Paisias again had to submit to God's will. When he became a priest, the number of monks increased to 12. 7 of them were from Moldavia and Wallachia, and 5 were from Malorossia. The premises of the cell again became insufficient for the increased brotherhood, and in 1757 Paisias Velichkovsky asked the monastery of Pantokratoros for the cell of the Prophet Elijah, located half an hour's walk from the cell of Saint Constantine. He received the blessing for this from the former ecumenical patriarch Seraphim. then resident at Pantokratoros Monastery. The fathers of the monastery supplied the Venerable Paisias with a special document, the Skete of, according to which the cell was elevated to the rank of a skete and Father Paisias became its abbot. In the process of establishing the hermitage, he also established worship according to the statutes of the Holy Mountain, which was performed in Slavonic and Moldavian. From this moment on, large-scale construction work began on the new skete, and they began to build a hermitage in the name of the Holy Prophet Elijah from the very foundations, and created a church, a refectory, a bakery, a cookery, an inn, and 16 cells, because the Blessed Father decided not to accept more than 16 people into the brotherhood, and they all settled together in the skete, in the joy and praise of God, in order to pursue a moderate way of asceticism. Bishop Porphyry Uspensky. Father Paisias did not want the number of monks to exceed 15, but he could not refuse newcomers who wished to join his brotherhood either. In this way, the number of monks in the skete grew to 50. The Venerable Paisias remembers this time in this way. The place where we settled on Mount Athos, a very harsh and difficult place, was hardly suitable for living. Even 2 or 3 people living together could hardly meet their needs. Besides, we were afraid that the Turkish authorities would impose unreasonable taxes on our poor community. For all these reasons, and many others, we feared that extreme ruin would befall us, and that our residence here, created by very great efforts, would come to an end. The monks of Pantokratoros Monastery respected the Venerable Paisias due to his humility, diligence, and Christ-like way of life. He was revered by all of Athos. His spiritual children were not only Slavs, but also people from Moldavia and Wallachia, as well as many Greeks. The Venerable Paisias Velichkovsky lived on Athos for 17 years, after which he took 64 monks with him, and in 1763, at the invitation of Lord Gregory Kalimaka, went to Moldavia to the monastery of Dragomirna, near the town of Suceava. Saint Elijah's skete became orphaned, but the beginning of Russian monasticism in the newly established skete on Athos was laid down. The skete of Elijah the Prophet became an example of unbending, prayer, and obedience for the whole of the Holy Mountain. It was the first monastic skete on Mount Athos where the brotherhood of 2 nationalities coexisted, and where services were held in 2 different languages, Slavonic and Moldavian. The founder of the skete, the Venerable Paisias Velichkovsky, ended his life in 1794. Today the relics of the saint rest in the Nimts monastery in Romania. Nimts Monastery is one of the oldest monastic settlements on Moldovan territory and dates back to the 12th century. Speaking of Saint Paisias, it is a great piety for us, Orthodox Christians, that his relics are kept here in the monastery. He revived monastic life throughout the entire Slavic region and influenced the orthodoxy of neighboring countries as well. Saint Paisias was laid to rest on the 15th of November 1794 and was buried here in this tomb. In 2013, with the blessing of Metropolitan Theophanes, the tomb was examined and the holy relics were found in it. The coffin was in the same place where it was buried. When the coffin was lifted and opened, the remains of Saint Paisias were found in the same position as when he was buried. There was not a single doubt in our minds that this was indeed Saint Paisias, as the books about him described even the clothes in which he had been buried. The tomb and coffin were examined, and all items and objects were recovered and restored. Some of them were sent to the monastery museum, and the rest were placed in the reliquary, together with the relics of Saint Paisius. This reliquary depicts scenes from the life of Saint Paisius, how he came to the Nymphs monastery, how he was doing signs here, how he departed unto the Lord on the 15th of November 1794, and how his relics were found and placed in this reliquary. When we worship the holy relics, we receive help for which we pray to the saints. That is why a large number of believers from many countries, including Serbia, Russia and Ukraine, come here to the monastery. And I would like to say that when people make a pilgrimage from Moldova, it is obligatory to visit the Nymphs monastery, to worship the holy relics of Paisius and the miraculous icon of the Mother of God. Skete of Prophet Elijah was deserted in 1763, but not for long. Other Russian monks settled there. They dug a well near their church and lined it with white marble, on which they inscribed the year 1775. Their abbots, according to the oral testimony of the present abbot of the Sketes, and according to the memorial book, was a Archimandrite Valaam, a former sailor. Bishop Porphyry Uspensky. Pantokratoros Monastery appreciated the virtues of the new abbot and gave the skete a new charter to replace the first one, received in 1757. Archimandrite Balaam appointed Father Athanasius as his successor, who was also elevated to the rank of Archimandrite and recognized by Pantokratoros Monastery as the new abbot of the Skete of Prophet Elijah. He ran the skete for the next 10 years. The monastery hoped that Father Athanasius would begin to repair the cathedral church and even allowed to cut wood and build new cells, having first received his blessing. During these years, the skete had to pay 50 piastres annually to the Pantokratoros Monastery, which were then given to the Turkish treasury. The monastery donated to the sketes a plot of wood of 200 hectares. It should be noted that in those days only 20 monasteries could own land on Mount Athos. This gift was proof of the good relationship between the sketes and the main monastery. Under Archimandrite Athanasius, the skete was replenished by the Black Sea Cossacks. As under Venerable Paisius, the problem of territorial expansion arose. The younger brethren had to move to the surrounding cells and huts, making their living by various crafts. And on Sundays and holidays, the whole brotherhood came to services in the cathedral church and then ate together in the refectory. The relatively peaceful period in the skete's history came to an end in 1821 with the beginning of the Greek struggle for independence from the Ottoman Empire. The ecumenical patriarch Gregory V was hanged in Constantinople, and the founder of the old Russian monastery, Rusik, and benefactor of the Skete of Prophet Elijah, the Moldavian lord Skete Kalimachi, was poisoned by the Ottomans. Many fathers left Athos. Archimandrite Parthenius, the abbot of the Skete, also decided to leave the Holy Mount, following the Brotherhood of Saint Panteleimon Monastery. He took with him the holy things of the monastery, part of the Holy Cross, holy relics, and precious utensils, and accompanied by the monks Sava and Damian, set out for Russia. On reaching the Black Sea coast, they stayed at the Ekaterina's St. Nicholas Monastery in the Libyaji Ostrov settlement. Elder Parthenius Agiev, convinced that the Turks would forever forbid him to return to Athos, offered the holy relics brought from the Skete to the Emperor Alexander I. But the Emperor, having worshipped the living tree and the holy relics of the Apostle Andrew, commanded him to keep them, in view of a possible peace with the Turks and a return to the Athos Skete. 8 years later, accompanied by 8 monks from Moldavia, he returned to Mount Athos, to his native monastery. The Skete was in a state of disrepair. The paths were overgrown with impassable shrubbery, and the ruined hulks of the buildings bore witness to looting and attacks by Turkish armies and maritime robbers. We came to our Prophet Elijah's Skete again, and it was deserted and all overgrown with forest, so that in a fortnight we had hardly restored it a little to the gate, and so much work had been done that only God knows. Bishop Porphyry Uspensky. During these years, the composition of the monks of the Brotherhood also changed. The Black Sea people were no longer admitted to the Sketes. There could be only Russians from various parts of Russia who had come to Athos, or the Little Russians, the so-called Cossacks, or Zaporozhian Cossacks, who were subject to Turkey. Bishop Porphyry Uspensky. On the 9th of June 1835, Hieromonk Nikitas, known as Prince Sherinsky-Shikhmatov, arrived on Mount Athos. In his notes, Father Nikitas wrote about his arrival at Skete of Prophet Elijah. The elder abbot, Hieromonk Parthenius, who has been a priest in this Skete for over 40 years and who has renewed it after the Turks had destroyed the monasteries of Athos during the Greek revolt, received us as sincere brethren, and he even gave me his cell, famous for the fact that the builder of the Sketes, Abbot Paisias, a Moldavian known for the holiness of his life, lived in it and translated the Philakalias book by Saint Isaac the Syrian from Greek into Slavonic. In the Skete of Prophet Elijah, Father Nikitas laid the foundation of the church of Saint Mitrophon of Voronezh and gave 4,000 levs for its construction to the monk Theodore. In 1836, the Skete population fell ill with the plague, probably brought by one of the pilgrims. Almost the entire brotherhood died, over 20 people, including the schema monk Theodore and the abbot of the Skete, the elder Parthenius. Only 6 monks survived. In 1841, Father Paisias, who with his brother from Bessarabia began to live in one of the huts of the Greek Skete of Kavsukalivia, belonging to the great Lavra, became the Skete's abbot. Since August 1841, the intelligent, pious and very devout Hieromonk Paisias has now been the head of the church. He was born in the Bessarabian city of Kilia, served under the hierarchs of Kishinev, Gabriel and Demetrius, until 1837, then under Archbishop Gabriel of Kherson and Odessa for a short time, and then retired to Athos, where he first lived in Kavsukalivia and then moved to the Skete of Prophet Elijah. Bishop Porphyry Uspensky. Father Paisias began the building of the Skete. A new central square was built, and the main buildings around the chapel were enlarged. In 1842, the Church of Saint Mitrophon of Voronezh was consecrated, and the following year, 15 new cells were built between the chapel and the Church of the Annunciation, which were thus connected under one roof. Prophet Elijah's Skete is built as a small monastery with a 4-story layout. In the middle of it, on a level square, stands the cathedral church, of stone, domed, small but decent. In its southeast corner stands another church, slightly smaller than the first one. This church is in the name of Saint Mitrophon, first bishop of Voronezh. On the eastern line of the Skete, beyond the temple's altar, there is no fence nor cells. On the western line stretches a dilapidated Brotherhood refectory, with a small chapel in it in memory of the Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. On the northern line there is a two-story house, from which an old building stretches to the northwestern corner on the same line. All the buildings, except the main temple, together form the enclosure of the Skete. Nearby, a vineyard blossoms, and in the depths of the valley, by the river Krisurari, stands its squat mill. In addition to the abbots, 25 monks live in the Skete. A tribute of 1,500 piastres must be paid for them. During the next 7 years, all the old cells were restored, a new refectory, a bakery, and new cells were built. Vineyards and orchards were plowed and expanded. On the 3rd of August 1868, Pantocrator's monastery honored Father Paisias with the title of archimandrite. By this time, he had managed the Skete for 28 years, and an understanding between him and the Greeks had been established. In 1871, after a short illness, Father Paisias was laid to rest. This marked the end of the third and longest period of prosperity of Prophet Elijah's Skete. The Skete was visited more than once by members of the Russian imperial family, after which the modest and little-known Sketes became well-known in Russia. For example, on the 17th of July 1845, Grand Duke Konstantin Nikolaevich spent the night at Prophet Elijah's Skete, after a visit to Old Rusik Monastery. In 1867, on the 16th of June, Prophet Elijah's Skete was visited by the Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich, and in 1881, the Skete had the high honor of twice receiving guests, members and representatives of the imperial family. The yacht on which the Grand Duchess Alexandra Petrovna sailed anchored at St. Panteleimon Monastery. The abbot of the Skete, Father Tobias, visited her aboard the ship and asked her to establish a new temple in the monastery. On the 22nd of June of the same year, Rear Admiral Dmitry Zakharovich Golovachov, representative of the Grand Duchess, laid the foundation stone of the church for the location of the altar, and on the 16th of August, the Grand Duke Konstantin Konstantinovich, on his way to Panteleimon Monastery, also spent one night in Prophet Elijah's Skete. During these years, the entire capital reconstruction of the Skete was financed from funds donated specifically for this purpose by the Grand Duchess Alexandra Petrovna, who had been married to Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich the Elder since 1856. But in 1881, after her return from Athos, she took the name Anastasia in the Pokrovsky Monastery in Kiev, which she had founded, and became a nun. The next stage in the life of the Sketes is connected with the name of the Venerable Gabriel. He took charge of the Sketes in 1887, and in 1891, Patriarch Joachim III of Constantinople elevated him to the rank of archimandrite. At Father Gabriel's request, the Skete was allowed to collect donations throughout the Russian Empire. The fundraising was organized in 1893 during Archimandrite Gabriel's trip to Russia with the holy icons of Prophet Elijah's Skete, the miracle-working icon of the Galactotrophusa, and a part of the relics of the Holy Apostle Andrew I Cole. At the same time, Father Gabriel was received by Emperor Nikolai II and the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church. With the money raised, a new building was built in 1894-1898, and a powerful irrigation system was purchased for Prophet Elijah's Skete. The Sketes brethren were now able to grow vegetables and eat them all year round. A cathedral church was completed at the Sketes farmstead in Odessa. In 1899, construction began anew on the new Skete temple. It took a year to lay the foundations, and in 1901, its basement was completed. Archimandrite Gabriel didn't wait until after the construction of the central church was finished. By 1901, Father Gabriel, exhausted from his trips to Russia, had fallen ill. On the 28th of June 1901, Father Gabriel left Athos to tour the Skete sub-villages in Russia. And on the 19th of October, he died at the Novonikolaievskaya Stanitsa sub-village. The body of Archimandrite Gabriel was transported to Odessa, where he was buried on the 2nd of November in the crypt of the Church of Saint Elijah. With the blessing of His Eminence Metropolitan Agafangel of Odessa and Ismail, on the 22nd of July 1994, the relics of the Venerable Gabriel of Athos were uncovered. This is the place of his burial. In fact, his relics were found miraculously, because no one knew where he was buried. He simply recalled himself. There was an extraordinary sign, and there is when the imperishable relics of the Reverend were found. But the imperishable relics themselves are not proof of His holiness and the need for canonization. But when miracles of healing began to occur, that is when all became convinced that he was a saint. The Lord God has revealed to this world another saint. On the basis of all this, canonization of the Venerable Gabriel was conducted in 1994. Here in the main church of the monastery, in the gilded wooden iconostases, are the miracle-working icons of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Galactotrophusa, and the holy relics of the Apostle Andrew the First Called. Previously, they were in the Skete of Prophet Elijah on Mount Athos. This image of Our Lady is a copy of the famous icon brought to Athos by Saint Sava of Serbia, from the Lavra of Saint Sava the Consecrated, located on the edge of a ravine, deep in the Judean desert in the Holy Land. The icon became famous for its miracle-working power in Russia, while Archimandrite Gabriel and the monks of Prophet Elijah's Skete were collecting donations there, with the emperor's permission. A wreath of gold and silver, decorated with precious stones, was made for the icon through donations from St. Petersburg and Moscow. Archimandrite Gabriel was succeeded by the former treasurer of the Skete, Hieromonk Maxim. Under him, in 1907, the final stage of the construction of the Sketes cathedral, which had already lasted 20 years, took place. The consecration of the main church of the Skete took place on the 19th of July, 1914. the First World War, the Russian Revolution, and the Second World War dealt a heavy blow to all Russian monasticism on the Holy Mountain. The small brotherhood of Prophet Elijah Skete began to dwindle, and the once flourishing Sketes began to decline vitally. In the 1960s, there were almost no monks of pre-revolutionary Russia left on the Holy Mount. Only 25 monks of Prophet Elijah's Sketes guarded the tradition of Russian monasticism on Athos. At this time, Archimandrite Nicholas made an appeal to foreign compatriots, to all Orthodox people in the diaspora, which stated, "At present, the Holy Mount is in great distress. Our misfortune is that after the First World War, the access of the Russian monks to Athos has ceased, and now we have a great depletion of people. The cells and huts remain empty, and as the monks die, fall into the wrong hands and get destroyed." In 1973, Pantokratoros Monastery appointed Father Seraphim Bobich, who had come from America, as the new rector of Prophet Elijah Skete, and the following year granted him the title of Archimandrite. In 1982, there were only 3 monks living in Prophet Elijah's Skete. By the early 1990s, pilgrims from Eastern Europe and Russia began to arrive. The history of the Russian Skete of Elijah the Prophet came to an end in 1992, when the exarchs, envoys of the Ecumenical Patriarch, arrived on the Holy Mountain to resolve the issue of Prophet Elijah's Skete. At that time, by decision of the sacred community, the Skete was evicted, and a few days later it was inhabited by monks from the Annunciation Sketes of Xenophontos Monastery, led by Archimandrite Joachim.
Λοιπόν, εμείς εδώ, η αδελφότητά μας,
We, our brotherhood, came here in 1992 to these holy Sketes and found it ruined.
ήταν πραγματικά εγκαταλελειμμένη,
It was really abandoned, the buildings and everything around it.
όλη η περιοχή, και δουλέψαμε πολύ.
And we worked for many years to restore the Sketes that the Russians had built.
Την οποία την φτιάξαν οι Ρώσοι βέβαια. Εδώ, δόξα τω Θεώ, καλά
We
είμαστε.
feel good here,
Και εσείς να τα χαίρεστε
and
αυτά,
we
και
and
να τα
you
χαιρόμαστε.
should enjoy everything that surrounds us here.
Ισχύει αυτό που έγινε.
We have worked very hard
Δόξα τω Θεώ.
to make the Skete what it is today. Thank God by His grace, everything is getting better. People cannot always do much, but there is God who helps us. In all the difficulties we have, we turn to God. He is with us. God's Mother is with us and helps us. The Russians are my brothers. Both we and you are Orthodox. We are brothers. There were a lot of difficulties in Russia. Poverty, hunger. You young people did not see that, but the older ones saw those difficult years. These are good years now. Putin is a good man and strongly believes in God. And, as I found out, he returned the church's property. You have gone through difficult times, and we Greeks have gone through difficult times. Now we have to be careful. These difficulties teach us to be attentive, united, loving, and supportive of each other. The Russians, like the Greeks, now have tense relations with the Turks and other nations. There are a lot of Muslim refugees coming to us now. Greece is full of Muslims, and we do not know what to do. You understand that it is difficult for us, but we are Orthodox Christians, and we will not change our faith. We and the Russians will stick to our Orthodox faith. I love the Russians very much. That is what I wanted to tell you. I love Russians, and I tell everyone who comes here that we are one family. But there are millions of you, and not many of us. There are millions of Greeks living abroad. There are Greeks in America, in Europe, everywhere, but they left Greece because of poverty. Just imagine, now, because of the economic crisis, thousands of young people are going abroad to find a job, and there are fewer of us now. And here all the refugees gather. Muslims come, who are fanatics, difficult people. On the 28th of June 2021, Father Joachim Karachristos passed away. He was a great authority among the Athonite monks and had many spiritual fellows around the world. And his sermons and teachings were always imbued with a profound theological sense. During the incomplete 29 years of Father Joachim's tenure at Prophet Elijah's Skete, the monastery was completely restored. On the 2nd of August 2021, on the feast day of the Prophet Elijah, Hieromonk Philemon became the new rector of Prophet Elijah's Skete, having served as dean for the past few years. Anyone who has been to the Skete probably remembers his hearty disposition as a hospitable host and has rarely been indifferent to his cheerfulness, gentle smile, and hospitality. With Father Philemon's blessing, we go to the Skete Museum. Here the most valuable historical documents, manuscripts, ancient vestments and church utensils are stored. The history of our Skete is not very long, only about 200 years. So we have very few old books, and the ones kept here are brought from other monasteries. Our library has about 5,000 to 6,000 books. Compared with other libraries on the Holy Mount, this is not much. Most of the books are printed. There are few manuscripts. Most of them are liturgical books, menologies, gospels, horologia, books of hours, books used in church services every day. We do not have many historical, theological, or other books, but it is remarkable that the fathers of our Skete created such a small library, and they did it with great enthusiasm, with inspiration, with love to the spiritual and cultural heritage. Is admirable. Glory to God. All the books in this section are manuscripts. We do not have many Greek manuscripts, primarily the 13th century salt on parchment.
Είναι του 13ου αιώνα αυτή η γραφή. Αυτά όλα αγοράστηκαν από τα γειτονικά
Most of the manuscripts of the Skete were bought in the neighboring monasteries. When the Russian brethren had a lot of money and could replenish the library. About 500 monks lived here in the 19th century, but very few of them knew Greek. There is nothing left from the time of Saint Paisias Velichkovsky. Everything he wrote was transported to the Nims monastery in Romania. Also of Greek manuscripts, there is a 14th century paper psalter. Here the handwriting is similar, from the same era. The writing of manuscripts changes over time, so it is possible to tell the age from the handwriting. The letters theta and lambda here are characteristic of 14th century writing. Here are the illustrations depicting how Saint Gabriel sets out on a journey to collect the nations. Here is how the church is being erected. Here are pictures from the Skete of Xenophontos Monastery. And this is the building of the church. Most probably, this is the photograph of Saint Gabriel. among the craftsmen
Είναι ο Άγιος
and
ο
builders.
Άγιος Γαβριήλ.
Καφότανε,
Ναι.
Και
Ο
οι πατέρες.
καπετάνιος και οι
Καπετάνιος.
πατέρες. Αφών προρογγυλία.
αφού,
Προρογγυλία εδώ. Προρογγυλία Σκήτη.
αφού.
Αυτό είναι βιβλίο του 1635.
This book is from
Για να
1635,
διαβάζει ο ιερέας
a
την λειτουργία.
hieratical priest's
Είναι η
service
βιβλία του
book,
Ιωάννου Χρυσοστόμου.
the text of the
Είναι η
liturgy
ευχή της
for the
προσκομίδης.
priests,
Ο Θεός,
the
ο
liturgy of
Θεός,
Saint
ο
John
Θεός,
Chrysostom.
την τροφή του
Here are the
Παντός
prayers of the proskomedia.
Χριστός, ξαποστήλασε εμάς. Αυτό είναι από την προσκομίδη. Για να διαβάσει ο ιερέας που πριν ξεκινήσει. Ωραίο αυτό.
Είτε.
Αυτό είναι πολύ ωραίο. Δες. Στο χέρι.
Πώς το κάναμε. Είναι χρυσά.
Χρυσά σχέδια.
A beautiful book,
Γραφεία, δες τι ωραία.
gilded
Είναι το καλό βιβλίο που
drawings,
έχουμε. Καλή
a
γραφή.
marvelous calligraphy.
Самая красивая книга, мне кажется. Ну, это, видишь, сборник
This is a collection of hymns,
Херувимской
cherubic songs, and here, Milost Mira,
Херувимские
chants for Eucharistic prayers.
достойно и
Here are the Athos chant and Turchaninov. Everything is in Russian.
Задонского распева,
Zadonsky chant,
Малопечерская. Это все ноты
the notes are handwritten.
Нектаревская у нас.
Milost Mira of
Старые
Nectarios,
распевы вообще. Сейчас
old
вообще
chants.
напишешь. Короче.
The main church of the monastery is consecrated in the name of the Holy Prophet Elijah. It is seven-domed and was built in the Byzantine style, common in Russian church building in the mid-19th and early 20th centuries. The church was designed by the diocesan architect Lev Prokopyevich from Odessa. The exterior of the church was lined with Athos stone and grey marble, but inside it remained unpainted with frescoes. The main altar of the cathedral is lit up in the name of the Holy Prophet Elijah. The right side altar is dedicated to the Apostle Andrew the First Called, while the left side altar is dedicated to the great martyress Alexandra.
Σε γυναίκα δεν συνηθίζεται
It is
να
not
υπάρχει συνάντηση
customary
του
for
Αγίου Ορός,
Athos
αλλά εδώ έγινε
to consecrate
επειδή
churches
η
in honor of
δωρήτρια
holy
που
women,
έδωσε χρήματα λεγόταν
but
Αλεξάνδρα,
this church
Αλεξάνδρα
is an
Πετρόβνα,
exception
και για να την κάνουν
in memory of the
χαρακτήρα, να την
benefactress
κάνουν-
Alexandra
να ευχαριστήσουν, κάνουν
Petrovna,
εκκλησάκι στο
to
όνομα της
fulfill her
δωρήτριας.
wish and to
Όπως
please
το
the
βλέπουμε, ήρθε με
benefactress
το καράβι που
who
είχε
donated
στείλει,
considerable funds.
κομμάτι-κομμάτι,
All the
όταν το
iconostasis
φέρανε εδώ,
were delivered from
συναρμολογήθηκε,
Odessa
λέει,
by
και
ship in
έγινε
parts,
επιτόπου. Ενώ ήρθαν
and
εκεί,
then
ήταν οι τεχνίτες
they were
καλοί,
assembled
πήραν
on
τα μέτρα,
site,
κάνανε μια δουλειά πολύ όμορφη και σοβαρή.
respecting
Από
all
κάτω
the
είναι ξύλο.
dimensions,
Από πάνω έχει
doing a
πυρό,
very beautiful
πύργο,
and serious work.
ταρόκολα και χρυσές
The
λίρες.
iconostasis
Πέραν μια λίρα,
is
του
made
βάζανε
of
δύο
wood at the
δέρματα
bottom,
και τη χτυπούσανε. Και η λίρα, ο χρυσός,
while above it is made of ceramics and gilding, which was obtained from gold coins.
ένα άσπρο στόκο.
Everything was done in such a way that after 110 years nothing has been spoiled, as if it was created yesterday. The luminous temple, the lighting, and the wonderful acoustics, together with the iconostasis, which radiates day and night, create a special joyful atmosphere. The lower row of icons is a creation of the Kiev iconographers who were some of the best masters. The icons here are unique. There are no others. The upper rows of icons are made by other masters, but together they create a single ensemble. At the right-hand eastern pillar, in front of the iconostasis, is the miraculous icon of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Tikhvin. It is an exact copy of the original icon, now kept in Russia in the monastery of Tikhvin. This miraculous icon was donated by Skete benefactor Mikhail Vyushin. We are here before the icon of Our Lady Lakrirussa. lachrymose,
διότι
tear
εδώ στο
stained.
ξύλο
A
φαίνεται
bullet
το
mark can be seen
άνοιγμα.
on the icon
Την Αγία
board.
αυτή στον
As
πόλεμο
the
με τους
icon
Τούρκους
helped
στην
the
Κρυμαία,
Russian army
βοήθησε
in
το
the
ρωσικό
war
στρατό.
against the Turks in the
Λέγεται
Crimea.
δακρυρούσα, αλλά στα ρωσικά
We call it
Τιχβίνσκαγια.
Dakrirusa,
Γιατί αυτή η
but in
εικόνα είναι
Russian
από το
tradition
Τίχβιν.
it
Η
is
παλιά
called
εικόνα όμως
Tikhvins,
ήταν δώρο
because
από
it
το
is an icon
Βυζάντιο
from Tikhvin.
στους Ρώσους.
But
Οι Ρώσοι κάνουν ένα πολύ
the old
μεγάλο
icon was
μοναστήρι
brought
στο
from
Tikhvin
Byzantium
και από εκεί
as
στείλανε
a
πολλές
gift to the
εικόνες,
Russians.
κόπια,
A large
εγγύματα,
monastery was
όπου
erected in
κάνανε
Tikhvin,
εκκλησίες.
from
Έτσι
which
ήρθε και εδώ
many
η
copies of this
Παναγία
icon
δακρυρούσα.
were made and
Αλλά
sent
όχι εδώ,
when your
στο
churches were
Εκκλησάκι
built. Such a
απέναντι,
copy was
που
also
ήταν
sent
και
to us
αφιερωμένο
here,
στο όνομά
for the
της,
church opposite
Παναγίας της
here.
Τιχβίνσκαγια.
It was
Όταν
consecrated
λοιπόν έγινε ο
in honor
πόλεμος
of
στην
the
Κρυμαία
Tikhvin
και η εικόνα
icon
άρχισε να
of the
δακρύζει,
Mother of God.
στείλανε
When the
μήνυμα
Crimean
στον
War
Τσάρο ότι
broke
μια
out,
εικόνα στο Άγιον
the
Όρος.
icon began to exude
Ο Τσάρος
tears,
είπε να τη στείλετε
which
στον
was
πόλεμο,
reported to the
ευλογίες.
Tsar
Γι'
as
αυτό
the
και όταν
icon on
γύρισε από τον
Athos
πόλεμο,
was weeping.
έχει
And
πολλά
he ordered that it should be
παράσιμα,
sent to the
μετάλλια
war
από
as a
τους
blessing.
αξιωματικούς του Κρυμαϊκού
Therefore,
πολέμου.
when she returned
Η
from
εικόνα
the war,
αυτή
she had
ερχόταν
many
από το
insignia
παρεκκλήσι όταν
and
είχαμε
medals from officers
Πάσχα
of the
και τη
Crimean
φέρανε εδώ
War.
οι πατέρες.
During the Eastern
Για
season,
μέχρι
the
το Αγίου
monks moved
Πνεύματος.
the icon
Μετά
from the
ξαναπηγαίνανε
chapel
στο
here,
εκκλησάκι.
where
Από
it
την ώρα όμως που
remained
έκανε τα θαύματα,
until the day of the
έμπαινε
Holy
στον
Spirit.
Κυρίως ναό και
However,
υπάρχει εδώ
since
σαν
miracles
ευλογία.
began to be
Δεν
performed
φαίνεται,
before the
εδώ που
icon,
δακρύζει,
it was
τα
left in the
δάκρυα
main
τα
church as a
σκουπίσανε
blessing.
και τα βάλανε
Here it is
κάτω
no
από
longer
εδώ,
visible where
μέσα
it
στο
weeps,
ξύλο.
as
Ένα
the
βαμβάκι
tears
σε
have
ένα
been
κομμάτι
collected
πανί,
by cloth
ευλογία κάτω από
and
το
placed in a
πουκάμισο
relic
και είναι
in the
από
icon
ευλογία
board.
για να
It is
θυμίζει
a blessing
το θαύμα αυτό των
recalling the
δακρύων.
miracle
Τώρα,
when the icon used to shed tears.
Τιχβίνσκαγια
Now,
έχει
our Tikhvin
βοηθήσει
icon
παιδιά
miraculously
για την
help
υγεία
children,
νεκρών παιδιών.
healing small children.
Το
The
πουκάμισο
gold
είναι
casing
δώρο
of the
από
icon,
τους Ρώσους
together
την
with
μέρα
its
που γίνεται το
insignia,
πόλεμο.
are gifts from Russians
Χριστό αυτό πουκάμισο
who returned
μαζί
from
με
the
τα
war.
παράσιμα.
Here, in the main church of the Skete, the monks cherish the relics of the martyrs, confessors, and venerable fathers, who with tears and humility were awarded the eternal kingdom. There are about 80 holy relics in all. Among them, the relics of the holy apostle Matthew the Evangelist, the holy apostle James, the brother of John the theologian, the holy prophet, forerunner, and Baptist of the Lord John, the holy disciple Gregory the Illuminator of Greater Armenia, and many others. There is also a part of the nativity swaddling clothes of the child Jesus. The main treasure of the Skete is a part of the life-giving wood of the cross of the Lord. It was used to make a cross which is 1/4 of its length and width. This cross is enclosed in another, silver and gilded. In 964, the Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus II Phocas donated this holy relic to the monastery of Assumption in the Archdiocese of Attis. The monastery was burnt down when the Turks ravaged Greece, and the monks were forced to sell the holy relics of the Holy Cross, along with part of the relics of the Holy Apostle Andrew the First called.
Εδώ στη Σκήτη φυλάσσεται το τίμιο ξύλο.
Here in the Skete, we have a piece of the life-giving tree of the Holy Cross. On the back of the reliquary, we find the inscription, the Holy Tree, dedication of Nicephorus Phocas, the year 964. Thus, this is a relic of Saint Nicephorus, who was a contemporary and friend of Saint Athanasius the Athonite, and a Byzantine emperor. Russian monks skillfully decorated this reliquary with silver, and it was presented in 964 by Emperor Nicephorus. On the other hand, we have a small particle of the foot of Holy Apostle Andrew. This particle is a small one. We used to have another, larger particle of his relics, but in difficult times, the fathers of the Skete sent the Venerable Elder Gabriel, together with that particle, to Odessa to collect donations, where it remained in the Skete Ocean. These are our main relics: a piece of the Holy Cross, a piece of the foot of Holy Apostle Andrew, and the miracle-working icon of the Mother of God, Galactotrophosa. There are no permanent cemeteries on Mount Athos. The Athonite tradition is to bury the deceased monks in an earthen grave with stone walls. It is then covered with a stone slab and earth. After about 3 years, the remains are removed from the grave and transferred to the ossuary, where they are neatly stacked on racks. It is believed that the wax color of the remains, rather than white, is indicative of the special holiness of the life of the revered monk. Sadly, our stay at Prophet Elijah's Skete has come to an end. We leave this holy Skete with sadness and love in our hearts, and wish the hospitable brotherhood and the abbot of the Skete, Father Philemon, the spiritual strength to preserve the ancient traditions of the Skete, which gave to universal orthodoxy such a great saint as Saint Paisias Velichkovsky. The monastic ascetic school he founded here, incredible efforts to translate the sacred books into Slavic, the revival of the lost traditions of Orthodox eldership and hesychasm gave a powerful impetus to the restoration of true monasticism not only in Russia, but throughout Eastern Europe. In its more than 200 years of history, the monks from Moldova, Ukraine, Russia and Greece have been brought to Prophet Elijah's Skete, creating with their own efforts and labor one of the most beautiful citadels of orthodoxy on Mount Athos. A whole majestic layer of Russian and Moldovan spiritual heritage, history and culture has been preserved here. The love of the Athonite monks for the Holy Mountain, where centuries ago their eternal citizenship was enshrined, is sealed in heaven. This love, consecrated by the Queen of Heaven, cannot be broken by anything earthly, and only a firm faith in God opens up the possibility for every nation to bring to the Creator the best that it has